welcome into another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com. Also, this episode sponsored by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'll tell you more about their latest offerings here in just a little bit. But welcome in. John Alden with you here as always. Hopefully got a good show in store for you today. Mitchell Paige will join us as he typically does. Also going to get a visit from Zach Browning, one of our staff writers at thehoosier.com. He's going to help us talk and recap a little bit of Indiana basketball's come from behind, gritty, tough win over Baylor in Indianapolis in an exhibition game. So a lot of different ways, angles, if you will, to unpack what transpired during Indiana's, big exhibition, if you want to call it that. I got to say this real quick about the exhibitions. I know a lot of people, especially in my neck of the woods. For those who don't know, I live down in the Kentuckiana region. So I'm around not only Indiana basketball, but Louisville and Kentucky as well. Their fan bases, I should say. And, a lot of them they were super excited to have, Louisville versus Kansas, Kentucky versus Purdue. That's the number one team in the country, preseason at least, the Boilermakers. But to me, these exhibition games, while it's a good way to see your team before things really get going, how much stock can you really put into some of these results? And that's something that I'm looking forward to talking with Zach Browning about here in just a little bit. So we'll talk more basketball here a little bit. We'll also, of course, talk with Mitchell Paige here in just a few minutes. And also later on, I want to talk a little bit about the Indianapolis Colts. I'm not going to have a guest on per se. I do want to bring on Drew Rosenberg here again, hopefully in the next week or so. He's historically on this show been our NBA/Pacers guy. He did inform me earlier this fall that he can come on and talk some NFL stuff as well, because I don't really necessarily have an NFL guy that I can just reach out to do these sort of things on a regular basis. So we may bring Drew in to talk a little more, not only about the Colts, but what's going on with the NFL so far, because the Colts, man, I'll save most of this for later on in the show, but they have done something that I don't think even some of the most diehard fans thought would have happened this year. So we'll unpack a little bit of their season so far through 8 games later on in the show. So plenty of things to get into. And, of course, towards the very end, as always, we'll wrap things up with some updates with men's and women's soccer and women's volleyball as well. And also women's basketball is getting things underway. But at the time of this recording, by the time this show comes out, I should say, there will be a result for their, I don't know if it's an exhibition or if it's their opening game against Missouri. S&T, I believe, is their opponent. But by the time this episode comes out, there'll be a result behind that. So I'm not going to do much talking about that. But we'll soon be tracking along with women's basketball as well, and plenty of other things as we shift into the winter sports calendar. So let's go ahead in just a few moments, jump into our content for the day. But before that, I want to go ahead and tell you about our friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Right now, the most festive gear of the year is back at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Don't miss the limited edition Magellan Outdoor Christmas Market Collection only at Academy. Get exclusive 2025 gear and gifts for all holiday parties, fun family photos, and Christmas morning traditions. You can check out the entire collection from matching pajamas and holiday print fishing shirts and dresses to exclusive new Mossy Oak Snowdrift camo styles and more. Shop in store or at academy.com. Need it fast? Get same-day delivery powered by DoorDash, and let your holiday fun begin with the Magellan Outdoors Christmas Market Collection only at Academy. Joining us now for our weekly fireside evening chats here on In Touch with Indiana Sports, of course, none other than Mitchell Paige with a Bob nightcap on today and a Chargers hoodie in homage to your brief but enjoyable scout team days in the NFL, I assume.
I would have said brief. You didn't have to add that. That was mean. I was going to make fun of myself.
Hey, but you know what? You made it one step further than 99% of the universe.
Yeah, this is The only reason I have this sweatshirt is because they gave it to me. So that's it. I couldn't tell you. I think the quarterback's Justin Herbert. Other than that, I have no idea who plays for that team. I don't even know who the coach is. I don't follow the NFL at all. Like none.
Well, there you have it. There's your NFL takes from Mitchell Paige here.
Colts by $1 million. That's what I know.
That Colts are dominating right now, which is
I saw
astounding.
They won again.
But speaking of domination,
yeah,
we're once again talking about another Indiana Hoosiers dominant victory. In fact, it is the second time this season that they have beaten a team by beaten a power conference opponent by at least 50 points. Of course, the other one was Illinois. And apparently this is the first time this has happened since 2018. I initially saw somebody put that it was the first time ever. That seemed a little improbable. So we did a little research, and apparently it happened, I guess, what was that, 8 years ago, 8 years ago?
That's crazy.
Which, by the way, that means it predates the 2019 extremely dominant LSU team that was coached by Ed Orgeron. So if that doesn't convince you how dominant Indiana football is right now, I don't know what will.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but what you just said floored me a little bit. You said 2018. We talked about it before we started recording. I'm like, okay, so it wasn't that long ago, like 3 years. That was 7 years ago. That I don't know if I can do the rest of the show. I hated that. I was out of college for 2 years in 2018. That was 7 years ago.
Wow.
I'm coming up on 10 years out of college. What the hell?
Isn't that weird to think about how old we're getting?
Oh my gosh, that's so bad.
Indiana wins 56-6 against the once streaky UCLA team who had won 3 in a row after firing Deshaun Foster. Everyone was loving up on the UCLA Bruins. They were kind of the cute little story for the last few weeks. Everyone loved offensive coordinator Jerry Neuheisel, so much so that there were some talking heads that had the audacity to choose UCLA to upset Indiana in Memorial Stadium this past weekend. Mitchell, of course, you were there in attendance as always. What was the vibe like at Merchants Bank Field at Memorial Stadium?
I'm going to get to that because I have a lot of thoughts about being in the stadium, but this just kind of popped in my head as you were talking about that. Everybody was talking UCLA is kind of the cute team. And it wasn't obviously to the extent. UCLA was much more infancy, but it kind of felt like Indiana last year. That's what they thought Indiana was last year. A cute story that would get smushed. That's just not the case. That for whatever reason, that like came together in my head. That's the way that people talked about Indiana last year, was how they were talking about UCLA. Cute story, beat up on some bad teams. They're going to get smushed. UCLA did get smushed. It was cruel. It was relentless. The crowd was sleepy. I would call it, like, it felt like a car wreck, but you couldn't take your eyes off. Indiana is not nice. They are not nice. They are not nice to play against. They do not care about your feelings. They just slam your head in the ground for 60 minutes every week. And it feels like when they're done, they're just like, all right, next.
Did you see the clip? It was at the very beginning of the Fox broadcast once the game was about to start, and Jenny Taft was, doing a little opening interview with Signetti, and she said, "What scares you about this UCLA team?" And he says, "We can't play scared." And he just walks off. I feel like that kind of evokes what you were just talking about.
Yeah, it feels like it doesn't matter who's on the other side. And that's the quality of the best teams. I'm not ready to say in the history of the sport, but we're getting close. They handle their business. When they have to make a play, they make a play. And they just repeatedly do what you're supposed to do. They take what you give them, and they just slowly tighten their grip around your neck. Now with UCLA, it seemed like it was a little quicker death, but then you realize, oh my gosh, we still have 40 minutes of this if you're a UCLA fan. Like, I was having so much fun for 3 weeks.
And wasn't it play it was play number 2 or 3. Nico Iamaleava throws the pick six, and it feels like you're off to the races right there.
Well, the first play, yeah, he throws the pick on the second one, off to the races for Indiana from there. But the first play, our entire defensive line, I think, just like picked up their offensive line and just laid them down gently, and then hit Nico 7 different times so hard. I actually thought, for what the game was, Nico Iamaleava showed a lot of toughness. He made some incredible throws on the run, making plays with his legs, getting away from definite sacks. And Indiana just continued to come. He's hard to tackle, and he just had no chance. And it didn't matter. John Elway could have played quarterback. It feels like it doesn't matter. Indiana's just going to smush you. It's really exciting. Although next week, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about next week. Of the remaining games, at Maryland's got to be the scariest one, right?
Honestly, I think a lot of it depends on how Penn State and Ohio State goes next week. And I know Ohio State should probably smush Penn State, but as I've kind of said, like, even though Penn State is completely spiraled out of control, they still have the ability to play well if they want to, if that makes sense. Now, they don't have Drew Aller anymore, so that is a bit problematic. But I don't think Penn State's going to beat Ohio State by any means. But if they make it interesting and they kind of give themselves a little bit of confidence, then I would say the following week against Penn State might be a little more troublesome than this upcoming game against Maryland. But again, that all depends on how things play out this coming week, while Indiana is, of course, also playing against the Terrapins.
I don't think so. My reasoning has nothing to do with Penn State. If Penn State beats Ohio State or loses by 1,000, I think it's still pretty easy to get up for Penn State. And it seems that Curt Cignetti's teams have no problem getting up anywhere. They'll play in the parking lot. Doesn't matter. Yeah. But I feel like we're nitpicking, but kind of a look-ahead spot when you're going to 110,000 people that are maybe a little rejuvenated after the dumbest firing in college football all season, feeling good about themselves until they realize, wait a minute, we can't find anyone that was better than him. I digress. It's easy as a player to walk out on that field and be ready to play. Maryland, even if it's a full stadium, it's just kind of a weird layout. It can get loud, but Maryland has a ton of athletes. They're pretty explosive sometimes on offense. I think their quarterback's been pretty up and down, but on an
He's a freshman quarterback too. He's probably one of the better true freshman quarterbacks in college football.
Yeah, on an up day, he can hurt you. And I just, for whatever reason, that Maryland logo, it just makes you nervous just because they've got a bunch of talent.
Indiana's had some weird games against the Terrapins.
Very weird. I remember we went out there when I was playing. We were down 21-3, like right away. But then Maryland did.
Maryland did.
And they played cover 0 the rest of the game, and I think we won by 3 touchdowns. Like it made no sense. But I guess this is more of a post-game show, so we can talk more.
Oh, it can be, honestly. So I'm not having a Maryland guy on this week. I was going to try to, but they don't have an On3 affiliate, so I'm not reaching out to anybody.
I like it. Okay. It'll be an interesting week. I expect Indiana to come out and do what they continually do to everyone. I haven't, and you've heard a lot of now coaches talking about it. Urban Meyer said it. They're the best coach team that he's maybe ever seen. That was Urban Meyer's words.
Interesting.
It just feels like they're always where they're supposed to be. You watch college football, if you sit down and somehow you have 4 screens going or the simulcasts, you watch every game all day. All these teams are in dogfights, giving up stupid plays, making stupid penalties. I mean, I'm a Miami fan as well. Watching that team, they just shoot themselves in the foot. They're so athletic, so talented. They have 9-10 penalties a game. They blow a coverage. They throw an interception that's stupid and not just a batted ball. Indiana doesn't do any of those things ever. They're so poised. The only time they've gotten a false start, and I'll die on this hill, they got a couple false starts is because Oregon was doing something that was illegal.
I'm not surprised. Like, if I'm an opposing team, I'm probably doing that unless someone says I can't. Because, I mean, if that's the one thing that can get Indiana off schedule, why not have your team's defensive line do a shift?
100%. I'm not mad at Oregon for doing it.
It's
Frustrating.
it's the official's fault for not enforcing it if it's a problem.
How is that not a penalty? But they just don't do anything that gives you a breath of hope if you're playing them. If you don't score, you're dead. You're dead. If you don't score on every possession, you're dead. And the problem is Indiana has a top 2 or 3 defense in the country that you can't block them. And they're always in position and coverage. How do you score on them every possession? I would hate to turn the film on Monday knowing we got to play on Saturday against Indiana, and like you're just looking for something. And you're sitting there hours and hours and hours, and you're looking for, and you never find it. You never find it.
Because even when Indiana makes mistakes, like let's just use Fernando Mendoza's interception, for example. Like that was purely a good play by UCLA's defensive line to get their hands up in the air.
Of course.
And maybe Mendoza could have thrown it, given a little more angle, that sort of thing. But it's still just a good play for the most part for UCLA's defense.
Yeah, I'm sure if we're watching the film, the offensive line coach probably yelling at somebody for getting pushed back. Yeah. But those plays happen. I don't call that an MA. That's not a missed assignment. That's not a botched play. That's just they're on scholarship too. They have good players. They're going to make some plays. They made one. When that happens, some teams get a little on the back foot, and Indiana just accelerates. They just accelerate. I think from that point, they were up, 7-0, gave up a field goal then. So they just won 50-3 from that point. Like, what are we talking about?
I saw another stat. I believe this is a true stat. Indiana has not given up a single defensive touchdown in the second half since the Old Dominion game.
That's correct. I saw that as well. They've given up 6 total touchdowns all year, and one of them was a pick 6.
Yep. That's wild.
But it's Indiana, so we're not going to talk about them the same way we do talk about them like with Ohio State's defense and LSU's defense and Texas A&M's defense. We're not there yet because of our logo, but they just continually – it doesn't matter what anybody talks about, whatever the narrative is, UCLA is coming in hot. Oh, Indiana doesn't play anybody. Okay, well, we're just going to smush everyone on the schedule, and we'll see you in January when we're holding up the college football playoff trophy is what this season feels like it's going to be.
And at that point, I feel like I don't know if I've said this on the air before. If Indiana went and won the college football playoff this year, I feel like I could unplug this microphone and be okay with never doing a show again and just be able to ride off into the sunset. And it's not like I'm not sitting here like I'm a Pat McAfee or anyone that's been a big success or anything. I do this mostly for fun. But if Indiana football, of all things, found a way to win a national championship, something that 2 years ago would have been complete insanity for anybody to say would ever be a realistic possibility, I think I could do. And I'm not saying I would do that, but I think I could do that if I had to.
You would have one job before you did that, and that's to bail me out of jail in Miami. Because that's where the national championship is.
How does that feel? Actually, we'll save that conversation for another day. That's got to be pretty cool that, of course, I know it's technically the Dolphins Stadium. It's also where the Hurricanes play. But to kind of have those two worlds collide if they do make the national championship game down there.
They've been colliding. It's coming. It's going to be a tough day in the Paige household, but I don't think it is. It's so much easier to love Indiana. They're so clinical that if you were a coach and you're trying to tell your team, like I'm imagining a high school coach. I saw a bunch of high school kids. I actually saw one of my high school coaches at the game. He's got a bunch of his now players that are all watching Indiana. Like if you're a coach, you just say, all right, this is how we want to play. And you press play on the first play and don't press pause until it's over. That's the way that we play. Play smart. They're freakishly fast on defense. They fly around better than anyone. The way that they're able to, even if one of their guys makes our first guy miss, feels like there's 15 guys on the field making every tackle. And I know I think this is what scares me the most about Indiana for other teams. You just beat a team that's coming off 3 great wins, a revived program, by 50 points. You just beat them by 50. And the first thing that we're talking about is Mendoza, talking about him not being on time, his footwork being messed up, receivers talking about we didn't separate from press coverage well enough, Signetti talking about it. That's a team that understands where it's trying to go.
Yeah.
It feels impossible for human nature not to set in like, wait a second, we are really good, and have even a little bit 5 seconds of letdown, and they just don't.
Signetti has, I almost use the term brainwashed, but that doesn't seem like the right way to use it. He has programmed each of his players to understand the fact that it does not matter any of these little victories, I guess we can call them. Any week they play, no matter how good the win is, no matter how much they win by, there is only one goal, and that is to finish the season as the best team in the country in college football, and then you can celebrate. That is a lot of discipline over the course of, what is it, a 5.5, 6 month season, where you just have to be in this almost robotic mindset where you can't let any sort of human nature thing, I guess, take over. And I'm sure there's been examples of it. I'm not trying to act like they're all just machines. Although somebody on social media that I was messaging with did mention that Indiana looks like AI football. They are just that clinical in every way. So I can kind of see where it does make a little bit of sense. But they are human. But
of course,
as a collective unit, they don't seem like it.
Yeah, and I think in its simplest form, the coaching staff has done such a good job making sure every week the team understands how hard it is to win. Even though they make it look so easy, winning is really hard. You watch it all around the country every single week. It's really easy for fans to lose sight of that. It felt like the crowd for UCLA was kind of like, this is going to be a smashing. We don't
Yeah,
even need
I
to
think that's the thing. I think Indiana fans, like and this is going to sound maybe a little like egotistical from a fan standpoint. They walked into Memorial Stadium, and honestly, the same thing against Michigan State last week, the last 2 Saturdays, expecting Indiana to blow the doors off of both of those teams, and that there was no reason, there was no anxiousness, there was no, cautious optimism, as we might have called it in the past. There was the expectation that everyone was going to sit in their seats and watch this Indiana football team do what they've done for the last year and a half, and that's completely obliterate an inferior opponent on their home field.
It felt like we were watching in to go see, like, get dinner in a show. That's what it felt like we were going to do. And it's obviously fine. Like, the fan base can do whatever they want. They still show up. It's still
packed. The thing, the
packed.
stadium's been full. Even if they've kind of been arriving fashionably late, as I'll call it. They'll kickoff will have happened. The corners of the stadium will still be a little empty, but once things have gotten rolling, that place is full.
It's full, and it is loud. It is. But for the coaching staff to not let any of that, when literally everyone in the state of Indiana understands this is going to be dinner and a show. Let's just go and enjoy ourselves, have some fun. Indiana still plays like I don't know, like they are playing the Colts. That's how they prepare, that's how they execute. It feels like that's how fast they're playing. They understand that the other team has really good players and you can get beat on any given Saturday, and it just doesn't happen to us. And that's been by far more so even than Mendoza's phenomenal. The defense, phenomenal. Defensive line is as impressive a group that I've seen in the country. The most impressive thing to me is the repetitive consistency at every single position, every single week.
I do want to go back to something we, I guess, kind of teased a little bit earlier when we were talking about Maryland for this upcoming Saturday. What they've done through 7 games, they're coming off a bye week. Their first 4 games, they were 4-0, Florida Atlantic, Northern Illinois, Towson, and then Wisconsin. Nothing super impressive. They've lost 3 in a row since then, but all of those games were one-score games. 24-20 against Washington. They're, of course, coming off domination of Illinois this past weekend. 34-31 against Nebraska. Both those games were at home, by the way, for Maryland. And then UCLA, who Indiana, of course, just took to the woodshed. That was on the road. They lost 20-17. But at the same time, a lot of the things that you talked about, still something to at least acknowledge. Really good freshman quarterback. Mike Locksley's been there for a long time. I don't really know what his identity is necessarily as the head coach of Maryland. I guess just being random, like never really. Maybe that's what it is. It's the inconsistency that he's had with Maryland that has become their identity over the years. And you don't know which Maryland team maybe that you're going to get on any given Saturday. If you go back to last year when Indiana played Maryland at home, that was kind of the first. That was the first home test, if you will, for Cignetti whenever. That if you remember, that was the game where Cignetti had to send the email out to the students to get everybody to show up. Like, hey, we've got I don't know if Maryland was undefeated at the time or just doing really good, whatever it might have been. But that was a big deal to kind of set the stage for what was to come for last year's Indiana football team. And this year, it's of course a little bit different.
Well, everybody last year talked about Indiana's beat everybody by 14 or more points. If you take out the Maryland game, it was like by 25 or more points. Maryland's the team we only beat by 14, 42-28, I do believe, through 2 picks.
It was a very back and forth game. Very
sloppy. We didn't take advantage or take hold of the game till end of the 3rd quarter, maybe early 4th quarter. They're in an area of the country that has a ton of athletes. So even if they're not getting the 5-star athletes out of the Northeast, they're getting guys that can roll. There's just a lot of speed, a lot of skill, a lot of size. They're just a kind of sneaky team that if you aren't clinical in the way that Indiana's been, they can sneak up on you a little bit. Do I think that'll happen? Absolutely not. But they have plenty of athleticism and talent to make some plays to hurt you.
I feel like as fans of Indiana football, we're just waiting for a little bit of a moment of complacency. Just kind of this. I think that might be the one anxiety that fans are thinking about. Like certainly something's going to happen, right? There's going to be a little bit of like maybe Maryland goes up 10-0. Like they score on their first drive, then they get a field goal. Indiana maybe just struggles to get their foot on the pedal, that sort of thing. That still doesn't happen. I think that's why that's the only. It's not even an issue. It's a potential issue that people are worried about.
It's the fear of the unknown. It's the dark corner of your room. But the problem is Indiana's light. There is no dark corner, it feels like. You're scared of this thing that doesn't feel like it exists. It happens for every other team. Everyone else in America has had that happen where you kind of get punched a little bit. Indiana doesn't have that even against Old Dominion. Do you remember we had on our show or on your show on our show?
We could say it's our show. You're on here frequently enough during football season. That it's our show
on our segment. How about that? That was crazy of me to say that. But after Old Dominion, there was some frustration's not the right word, but maybe concern. Like, oh, we're not as explosive. Got to the red zone.
There was big issues like, oh, we can't punch it in the end zone. Like, why did Cowboy Colt, why did he run for 2 75-yard touchdowns?
Right.
It was very strange.
Yeah. And, oh, man, what's wrong? So maybe that's our moment of adversity when really it felt like, and I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but maybe I will, came on here telling you that, hey, there's probably a plan. Let's just relax. They probably have it figured out. It seems that they do.
I do remember, too, I don't know if it was week 1 or week 2 where Cignetti said during, I don't know if it was a pregame or a postgame press conference, but he said that there was a couple of guys who had transferred into the program who hadn't like completely bought in. I don't know if that's the verbiage that he used, but he said there was a couple newbies who had come from some lesser programs. He didn't say which ones, that they were still trying to, get them fully. My brain keeps going into this brainwash. Like that's what it is. I know it's not what it is, but that also kind of feels like it's what it is.
He's
But that's such a
brainwashing us
negative
too.
term to use.
He's brainwashing us too. I want you to know that. I talk like him in regular days.
Okay.
I don't even. He's brainwashing all of us. And 2 years ago, John, we were begging for us to just show some fight, and now our head coach has brainwashed us.
I've got to say too, and I don't want to dwell on this, but if you're Tom Allen and you're looking at what's going on here, are you happy for Indiana, or are you wondering like, man, what was I doing wrong? Or I can't imagine. Honestly, Tom Allen probably doesn't care too much. I mean, I know he's probably upset about how things ended, but he's probably
he's got
not.
His own problems. He's
got
a team at Clemson that can't do nothing.
I was going to say he should have stayed at Penn State, but that's also they're having problems. So,
dude, I can't say what I'm. All right, let's move on from what.
Yeah, that's why I said I didn't want to dwell.
Remind me, I'm going to tell you something after this. Okay. It just I did. Did you see Zach Osterman's article?
I haven't read. I do like to read Zach Osterman stuff every once in a while, but I don't always get around to it.
Yeah, he was talking about like what we're doing right now is it's revolutionary. It's amazing. It's a 2-year turnaround that really took 20. And you talk about the long-term buy-in that started with Hepner bringing the Rose out to his introductory press conference and saying like, this is where we're going. Getting at least, even if the national media didn't buy into it, there was a belief when I was there that we could win. We can win there. This isn't a dead
there
place.
Was. And I want to talk. I want to say I feel like I'm stepping on your toes, so I do apologize. But I remember during the Kevin Wilson years that you played in, all that was missing was a decent defense. And it felt like that those Indiana teams could go somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just been it's like Rome wasn't built overnight, even though it kind of looks like it now. What Cignetti has done, it's insane. We were maybe at like the second step on the ladder of the 100-step ladder. He took us from 2 to 100 in 18 months. So we couldn't have done it without the dudes that are here now, the way that they play. But there's just been consistent, slow buy-in, and then we got the right guy, and we threw it all at once. And it's been so cool. It started obviously last year, but just walking around and at the games, around town, up in Indy, like wherever, people are talking about Indiana football all the time, and the conversation is always changing. But I talk to my dad however many times a week. He's at the driving range, and there's guys that don't even know that I'm his son. I played there. Like, they're not talking to my dad about Indiana football. They're just talking amongst themselves that Indiana's going to win the national championship. And it's – I think some teams like, oh, yeah, maybe we can. What Indiana did to UCLA, that's a Big Ten team, renewed faith. And the only word is smush. They just smushed them. And all the years I've been watching college football, that's what the national championship team does.
Yeah.
They smush everybody. They overwhelm you. Slowly rip your heart out of your body. Take your will, as Cignetti. Like, they are snatching wills every single week. It's so impressive. I can't wait. I'm actually I'm going to Tennessee, Oklahoma next week.
Okay. Interesting.
And
in Knoxville?
In Knoxville.
I think. Okay.
I'll be interested. And those aren't obviously the best teams in the SEC, but they're upper echelon. I've watched a lot of Indiana. I'll be curious what that game looks like speed-wise, execution-wise, and the way that it feels, because that's a new thing for Indiana. The cautious optimism, you were spot on. Like, man, we're really good. but you still have some of that creeping in the back. The expectation to just body bag people, the way that feels walking into the stadium when you're like going to a funeral, I'll be curious what Tennessee feels like
Because
relative to that.
there's only a handful of programs that every single year have the feeling that you just described. It's Ohio State. It was Nick Saban, Alabama.
Yep.
And that might be it in terms of an every year basis. Is that incorrect to say? Who else would be in that
Georgia
category?
for a while?
Yeah, Georgia's a good example.
And Georgia kind of did it the same way that Indiana does it. I think that's a really good comparison because Ohio State has done it with and they've been good for so long, so they've done it in a million different ways. But a lot of times they have so many explosive weapons at receiver. They have unbelievable running backs. They have a Heisman Trophy. Well, I guess Indiana has a Heisman Trophy quarterback, but Georgia felt like they just bullied you around the field. That's how Indiana plays. They just bully you. They don't go over the top. They don't trick you. They punch you right in the face over and over again. It was a weird feeling walking in there. I had never felt anything like that before. I liked it a lot.
Mitchell, as always, I appreciate our conversations, and
yeah,
every week is 1 week closer to whatever is going to end up being the final moment of this Indiana football team. I do believe that a national championship is a realistic thing. I'm probably going to say that every week until it no longer becomes a realistic thing.
Absolutely a real
It's
thing.
like innocent until proven guilty at this point.
Yeah, they're the best team I've seen. So I would say it's realistic.
Mitchell, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your time in Knoxville. Are you gonna wear Indiana gear to the Tennessee game, by the way? Are you gonna do that?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of weird that I just said that. I'm going. My best friend from high school, one of my best friends from high school, is a huge Tennessee fan. Kevin Johns' son is actually a he's an undergrad assistant for Tennessee. So I was like, yo, my buddy's a huge fan. Do you have 2 tickets? And he had them for this game. So we're going down there. We're going to see young Coach Johns spend the night on Saturday, but that's the reason I'm going. So I can't wear Indiana stuff.
You may get something thrown at you in volunteer country.
Not because it's Indiana, because it looks like Oklahoma.
That's true. It's literally the same color scheme, same color scheme.
If they were playing Kentucky, I would have no problem.
Yeah.
But it looks like Oklahoma. I'm not even going to risk it. I think the game, it's either the Tennessee game starts at either 6 or 8. If it's 8, I'm good. I'll watch the whole Indiana game before I even go in there. If it's 6, might have to keep the candy stripes on for at least a little bit in the stadium. At least a little bit. They're undefeated. Haven't lost in 2 years in the candy stripe shorts, so feel like I got to keep them on. Didn't wear them to Notre Dame and didn't wear them for the Ohio State game.
Real? Are you serious?
They're shorts.
Fair enough.
And Notre
Dame Ohio State game, were you there in person?
I was not there in I wear them no matter what, but I forgot them. I was playing in a golf tournament in Arizona, and I forgot them because I'm an idiot.
It's pretty wild that the 2 times you have not worn them coincide with the 2 losses.
I promise those are the only 2 times. I didn't wear them. I actually didn't wear them this last week. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Okay, well,
so the
superstition canceled.
Superstition canceled. But last year, the only 2 times I didn't wear them.
All right, Mitchell, enjoy your week. We'll do this again next time.
Go Hoosiers.
As always, we appreciate Mitchell Paige and the insight, the knowledge, the wherewithal, whatever you want to call it. I feel like I say the same old song and dance every time I talk about how appreciative of it I am of having Mitchell Paige on the show each and every week during the college football season. And I'm sure in particular, these last 2 seasons have been a whole lot more fun than years prior when I've had him on, not when I was doing this show, back when we were doing our old show, This Week in Indiana Football, for our former affiliate. But glad to have Mitchell Paige on. And things are getting exciting with Indiana football if they weren't already exciting. So we'll go ahead and put the football talk to bed for now, at least the IU football talk. I did mention we'll talk briefly about the Colts here in a little bit. But now I want to transition into Indiana basketball after their exhibition victory over Baylor at Gainbridge Fieldhouse over the weekend. A nice little appetizer, a way to get fans excited before the Darren DeVries era officially gets underway here very soon at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. It's going to be a very fun crossover season once again. I say it was very fun. I know the Mike Woodson, his final season last year, it was, nothing to be too excited about. And I remember I don't want to go too far down this path, but it's ingrained in my brain how horrible that loss was down in the Bahamas in the battle for Atlantis to Louisville. I talked earlier in the show about how, I'm around Louisville fans often, and seeing them kind of have their resurrection moment against Indiana at one of their lowest points of the Mike Woodson era, definitely not fun to be on that side of things. So hopefully the Darren DeVries era will get off to a better start, and they'll get a chance at revenge against Louisville later this season. I believe that game's played in Indianapolis in the Gainbridge Fieldhouse as well, just like this past exhibition was. So that's definitely a matchup to look forward to during this non-conference slate. And plenty more things to get excited about. So we'll go ahead and get into our segment with Zach Browning here in just a moment. But now I want to go ahead and tell you about our friends with BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use our bonus code ON3, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. First, you'll download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll then receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. If your bet loses, just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 or call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. A bunch of numbers I don't need to read. First bet offer for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable. Bonus bets expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Joining me now from thehoosier.com, it is staff writer Zach Browning. Welcome to In Touch with Indiana Sports, my friend.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. We're going to talk a little bit about Indiana's exhibition victory over Baylor, 76-74 at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Very unique exhibition setting. Most of these are home arenas for these opponents, and this one, of course, played in the Pacers arena. So a very unique venue, a very interesting game, a very good outcome, of course, for Indiana, but there's a lot of ups and downs throughout the game. What's kind of your initial impressions of not only the game, but kind of the beginning of a new era of Indiana basketball?
Well, it certainly is that, isn't it? A new era of Indiana basketball. And I think the first thing first is you can't look at that game and look at the two exhibitions Indiana has played without seeing that new era of Indiana basketball. Just the three-point shots, the pushing the pace, the up and down. It's just so much new for Indiana. We haven't really seen this in the Cream and Crimson. We haven't seen three-point shots, haven't seen up and down high-tempo offense in really some time in Bloomington. So that was for sure new. I think that was probably the biggest takeaway, specifically with the player Lamar Wilkerson really embodied that. He took, I think it was 9 threes. He went 3 of 9, I believe, from three-point range. So team-wide, the three-point shooting, the up-and-down tempo, that obviously stands out. But specifically Lamar Wilkerson, he kind of embodies that more so and really better than anybody else on the team. And he really stood out in that exhibition win over Baylor as well. He was phenomenal in that one.
Yeah, and in both the exhibitions, definitely a higher volume of three-point shots than Indiana teams were used to in the last several years. A lot better of an output in the first game. Of course, Marion, a much lesser opponent than Baylor, only 6 for 24 from three-point range against Baylor. But again, this was there's probably a little bit of nerves. You're going up against a team that had a head coach that you knew Indiana fans were interested in during the offseason in Scott Drew. And there were several moments where it looked like there were times where Baylor may take control of the game. But one thing that you saw with this particular Indiana team, and I know that it's only an exhibition game, there was a level of toughness that was needed to be able to get, fight back into this game and ultimately pull out the victory. Another thing to take note of, they were almost perfect from the free throw line, 20 of 21. Lamar Wilkerson was perfect, 11 for 11. That's another thing that Indiana fans have not been used to over the last several years. I feel like that was a staple back during the Tom Crean era. Even though there were lots of ups and downs with that regime, it felt like there was always really good free throw shooters. It's good to potentially see that come back under this new era with Darren DeVries. Again, only an exhibition, but it was definitely a part of the something that stood out during this game, and definitely shows a level of toughness in one of these grinded out games, I feel like.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it's not just that exhibition win against Baylor, but you think back to when this team went to Puerto Rico for those 3 exhibition contests earlier this summer. They were down by 20 points to the Serbian squad they played a couple of different times in those exhibition games in Puerto Rico. So it's a consistent theme. Now, Darren DeVries, I think he'd be the first one to say, I don't want to keep falling down 15, 20 plus points in each exhibition that we play. But at the same time, it's at least good to see some fight and some battling back from this Indiana team. I mean, if we think back to last year, you're thinking about, the game against Illinois in Bloomington where Indiana got down to like 30 at halftime, and it only got worse. There was not really much fight when that team got down last year. And I think that's something that we've already seen from this year's Indiana team, from a Darren DeVries-led Indiana team, is, they got down by 20 plus in both of those Puerto Rico exhibitions to the Serbian squad they played. They got down by as many as 13 against Baylor in that first half, and there was fight. And I think Darren DeVries said it after the game. He put it perfectly, It wasn't perfect, but he has guys that want to win, and that's what stood out to him, is that, he turned to the guys in the locker room. He was looking around, we're down. Yes, they got it close at halftime. I think it was a 4-point game heading into the halftime locker room. But he said, I think there was a point in that huddle where he said late in the first half, there was a point they were down 13, down double figures, and he looked around at the guys and said, look, let's get it down to 4. Let's get it cut into it at least a little bit before this halftime. And he looked and he rounded out huddle, and he saw guys that wanted to win. He saw guys that wanted to fight back. And I think that was something that stood out, especially talking with him post-game. This is a group of guys that it's an exhibition. Yes, the score, the result, it didn't really matter, but they still wanted to win. In a competitive environment, he's got guys that want to compete, that like to compete, and that want to win, even if the result doesn't necessarily matter. And I think that stood out. Again, new era of Indiana, but that stood out definitely in the exhibition against Baylor.
One thing that I don't want to say it's cause for concern, because this particular player is only a freshman, but he's had some really good showings in Puerto Rico in the Marion game. But Trent Sisley, 17 minutes and no points and not really much on the stat sheet in general. I think, you could chalk up a lot of this to, again, just being a brand new player to the college game, going up against a high caliber opponent in a Baylor. But did it kind of surprise you at all to see him not be much of an impact in this game?
It did a little bit, maybe not so much as some or as most, because the thing with Trent Sisley is, as a freshman, he is more advanced physically than a lot of freshmen that you typically see, and I think that was definitely on display in Puerto Rico. Those guys weren't super physical. They weren't super big in Puerto Rico, and against Marion, he was bigger than anybody else Marion could have thrown at him. But he did, I think, struggle with the speed of the game and the pace of the game and how quick, fast, strong, and long that some of those Baylor forwards were. And I think that's something that will be the biggest adjustment for him at the Division I level. We'll see it maybe not so much in non-conference play outside of the Louisville, Kansas State, and Kentucky games. But against the power conference teams, against the high major teams, I think he probably will struggle with that, because as good as going down to Montverde for his senior season was to physically prepare himself for college basketball, even at Montverde, even when you're playing guys that are 4- and 5-star guys, you really can't prepare yourself for the physical nature, the speed at which the Division I game and specifically the high major power conference game is played. And I think we saw that a little bit. He wasn't super ready for the speed. He wasn't super ready for the length and physicality that Baylor had to offer. So I think that'll be the biggest adjustment period. We know he's super skilled. We know he can knock down threes, And I also think another point to that is Indiana didn't run many specific sets, not even for him, just sets in general. There wasn't a lot of specific design plays run. It was a lot of just freelance stuff. You don't want to show too much. You want to be a little bit vanilla, as Darren DeVries said in an exhibition game.
Yeah.
When Indiana's running their sets, he can be a byproduct of getting some, drive and kick looks at three. He can be a byproduct of some sets. So I think that factored into it too.
When you look at the three highest scorers in this game, Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, Tatum Connerway, I do believe it's kind of assumed that those three guys in particular, that's going to be maybe Indiana's quote-unquote three-headed monster. And I'm not trying to say that and say that like Indiana's got three killers on their team that are going to be impossible to beat. But if Indiana's going to be competitive against the best of the Big Ten, the best in the country, you're going to need good games from probably at least two of the three night in and night out in the Big Ten, I would imagine.
Yeah, the two guys when you look at how this team was built, Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, obviously this offseason. Tucker, he has the potential to be an all-conference guy, a top 20, 30 player in America. You look at Lamar Wilkerson, he averaged 20.5 points per game last year at Sam Houston State. One of, if not the best three-point shooters in the Big Ten or even the country, 45% last year from three-point range. So those guys jump off the page. Those are the guys at the top of the scattering report. Every team Indiana plays is going to have Lamar Wilkerson and going to have Tucker DeVries circled because they're just so talented. But Tatum Connerway, he's going to have the ball in his hands more often than not. He is the team's point guard. He is the guy that brings the ball at the floor more often than not. He is the guy that gets the offense and gets the team into their sets in the half court. So I think the Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, that's not super surprising. You know that those two guys are going to be alphas. Those are going to be scorers. Those are going to be two of your best players. But Tatum Connerway, he comes in from Troy, defensive guy, going to be able to spread the ball out a little bit. Whatever scoring you get from him might be secondary or even tertiary to his defense and to his distributing. But I think you saw a side of Tatum Connerway, specifically down the stretch, specifically that game winner. That's a guy that Indiana, if he plays at that level with that type of mindset, he's the guy that, can go get a bucket for you, go take a guy off the dribble and go score that last second bucket. It wasn't Tucker DeVries. It wasn't Lamar Wilkerson that got the last shot. So if Tatum Connerway can provide that, and if you're looking at an exhibition, you're trying to extrapolate small things like that, that type of ability, that type of mindset, that killer attitude that Tatum Connerway showed down the stretch of that game, that is telling. That is something big Indiana fans, I think, will be looking to see again throughout the season from a guy like Tatum Connerway.
Yeah, it feels like Indiana hasn't had a point guard with that type of a mindset, at least one that comes to mind immediately, since someone like Yogi Ferrell. And it's been almost 10 years since the end of the Yogi Ferrell era of Indiana basketball. So it'll be interesting to see what Tatum Connerway is able to do with, I believe he's only got 1 year of eligibility remaining, if I'm not mistaken. So it'll be a 1 year wonder for him. Hopefully he'll make the most of it. And, of course, Indiana will get their regular season started against Alabama A&M next Wednesday. Now, before I let you go, Zach, I do want to kind of ask you about what you think of these exhibition games in general, because we're not too far removed from when these used to be called secret scrimmages, and you didn't really know what was really going on behind closed doors in all these games. And really since the post-COVID NIL era that we're in now, these have been, almost events of sorts. Of course, Indiana playing their game in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Down in my neck of the woods in southern Indiana, the Kentuckiana area, if you will, you had Louisville bringing Kansas into the KFC Center. You had Kentucky welcoming in Purdue. And, of course, Kentucky beats the doors off of what is considered to be the number one team in the country right now. How much of this is overreaction potentially? How much stock do you put into these games? Because if you remember last year, Indiana went down to Tennessee, got a pretty good win against the Volunteers, and that, of course, didn't really amount to anything.
Yeah, and that's a Tennessee team that ended up making the Elite Eight last year, and we saw exactly how little Indiana was able to do last year. So I think you can't take much from the results of these exhibitions. Is Purdue still probably the number one team in the country and entering the year? Yes. Does the loss in an exhibition to Kentucky really do anything to dissuade me from thinking that way? No, probably not. You can't really take much, in my opinion, from the results. Win or lose, that doesn't matter. Maybe if it's like a 30-point loss, you can take a little bit more from that in that instance. If you're Purdue losing by 40 or something like that to Kentucky, maybe you can take something a little bit more from that. But to me, it's more about how the team plays rather than the result itself. If you look at Purdue and you think about the Purdue aspect, Trey Kaufman-Renn trying to adjust to playing a new position at the power forward rather than the center, you can take a little bit more that, he struggled a little bit rather than the fact that they just lost the game. Maybe you point to, hey, is TKR ready to kind of assume that power forward position and play alongside another big? It didn't look like they had much spacing around him in that game. So you can take things like that. If you're Indiana, you can take what we just talked about with Tate and Connerway. You can take the fact that Indiana did get up more threes. The process was there. They didn't make a lot of threes. The result, as far as the three-point shooting, may not have been there, but you can see the process and you can kind of see those types of minute things. So I think you can't really take the results, win or lose. If Indiana would have lost against Baylor, I wouldn't have thought really much differently at all about this Indiana team heading into the season. But you can take some of those smaller things. We didn't see much to Josiah Miles. He only played 1 minute. You can take something away from that rather than the actual score line at the end of the game. I think that's where you have to kind of nitpick and be a little bit more selective with what you take away from these games.
Yeah, and plus at this point right now, when you know very little about each team, it's very easy to just take small sample sizes and run with what you see because that's all you have at this moment, especially when you have teams like Indiana that have a brand new roster and you kind of want to figure out what this team might be all about. But really, in reality, it's going to be a while until we really find out this team's true identity. Of course, there's going to be plenty of tests early on. You got Marquette in the second game of the season. You're going to have Kansas State in Assembly Hall. Of course, Louisville and Kentucky, one of those games being in Indianapolis, one of them being down at Rupp Arena. So plenty of tests throughout the non-conference coming up that's going to make an exciting next couple of months to open up the Darren DeVries era.
And the other thing is Indiana even has a little bit more advantage than a lot of these other teams because Indiana had the Puerto Rico trip. And with that Puerto Rico trip comes extra summer practices that you're allotted. A lot of these teams, you're looking at the Purdues, the Kentuckys, they've been practicing for about a month now. And when you build a team through the transfer portal, like in Indiana, I mean, Baylor had nobody on their roster from last year on that team that played in the exhibition this weekend either. So, and Baylor hasn't had as much time as Indiana to practice with the lack of a foreign trip, not being able to go overseas and get extra time, not only with the team off the court, you get those extra exhibition games too when you take a foreign trip, but you also get just more practices. You're allowed to practice more when you have a foreign trip. So I think, again, you really can't take much stock in the result, but it's good to see how guys are gelling. Maybe you can see a 2-man game working out or something like that. But yeah, the exhibition season, and that's what non-conference basketball is for. That's why you see the debate between scheduling hard non-conference games versus scheduling easy non-conference games. These exhibitions, they're perfect for challenging your team early because you can play one of these top teams in the country and not have to worry about it affecting whether or not you can make the NCAA tournament, 5 months from now. So I think that's where you see the value, the biggest value in these exhibitions. Zach,
anything you want to promote coming up for you on thehoosier.com before I let you go?
I mean, there's a pretty good football team over there. If you want to hear about the ins and outs of the Indiana football team, maybe not the biggest end of the season, at least schedule-wise. Indiana is probably going to be double-digit favorites in every game they play the rest of the year on the gridiron. But anything you want that is Indiana football-related, basketball too, head over to thehoosier.com. We've got you covered with great stuff over there, weekly, daily content, both on the recruiting side and on the team side over there at thehoosier.com. So make sure you check us out.
Zach, I appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely have you on more throughout the basketball season here coming up.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm always happy to come and talk about the Hoosiers.
A big thanks to Zach Browning for helping us break down everything that happened during Indiana basketball's exhibition. And, of course, we'll be checking in with plenty of our staff members throughout the upcoming basketball season. And of course, that includes Zach, Kyler, Alec, Colin, Drew. We have a great team at thehoosier.com and plenty of guys that we can check in with throughout this upcoming season. All right. We got to talk about the Indianapolis Colts. I've unfortunately not done them enough justice so far this season. I know I talked about their fast start earlier on, but the Colts have been on a tear, to put it. That might even be putting it lightly. And what I'm about to say might be considered a hot take for some people. But I think there's a real chance that this year's Indianapolis Colts team just might be the best team in the NFL. That's right. I said it. There's a chance with this high-powered offense that really nobody saw coming. When Daniel Jones was brought into the fold of things during the offseason. Many people were wondering, is it going to be him or Anthony Richardson? Even if it is Daniel Jones, how much of a difference is it going to make? And he fits so well into what the Colts have been doing that it's opened up so many other avenues. Namely, Jonathan Taylor has been having one of the best seasons, not only of his career, but maybe for the entire, NFL season so far. Jonathan Taylor might be the NFL MVP right now. Not only that, I mean, this is more so a personal thing. So Jonathan Taylor's on my fantasy team. I think he might be the fantasy points leader as well. That dude puts up numbers each and every week. I believe he's one of the only star players so far this NFL season that has yet to really have an off week, And so for the Colts to be as consistent as they are, I mean, they're a silly mistake away from being 8-0 right now and the lone unbeaten team in the NFL. Now, I know that their schedule has not necessarily been the hardest or the toughest. A quick recap, they dismantled the Dolphins in their first game, the Broncos in game 2. They've already defeated the Titans twice. Their one loss came to the Rams. They took care of the Raiders, the Cardinals, the Chargers. Chargers was a really good win on the road. And now this upcoming slate is very interesting, especially really these next 3 games in particular. You got the Steelers on the road. They're coming off a loss to the Packers. One that I know I didn't talk much about my gambling efforts over the weekend, but the Steelers losing to the Packers kept me from winning an NFL parlay this weekend. I did hit a college football parlay, but that is neither here nor there. You got the Steelers on the road. That'll be a good test. You got the Falcons at home. Michael Penix is kind of banged up right now, so that should be a matchup that's in your favor. And then you have what's probably, first of all, you have a bye week after the Falcons game, which comes at no better time because on November 23rd, you have what will without a doubt be the prove it moment when it comes to finding out whether or not the Colts really are a team that can be considered Super Bowl contenders. And that is when they head out west, and not far out west, but they head a little west to face the Kansas City Chiefs. And I know that this Chiefs team is not, what they were a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago. They're 4-3 right now, and who knows where they'll be sitting here in a few weeks. But if the Colts can go into Arrowhead Stadium and take care of business, or not, I don't even want to call it take care of business, but, find a way to get a really difficult road win. And we also have to assume things go well with Steelers and Falcons in some way, shape, or form, even if you don't necessarily win both of those games. But if you come out of Arrowhead Stadium with a win, or even if it's a close game and you're competitive and it's not kind of a fluky type of score, that's when I think we'll know for sure whether or not the Indianapolis Colts are truly in the conversation for being in the Super Bowl hunt. Which, again, who knew we would be sitting here at this point in the NFL season talking about the Colts in this way? At the beginning of the season, I said I knew there would be an opportunity for the Colts to do something because the schedule looked favorable for them. And I said it like this as well. Bad teams don't know they're bad yet at the beginning of the season, which everyone assumed that the Colts were likely heading in that direction once again, just based on the offseason moves. Nothing was very flashy in that regard. And so when they got that first opening win in dominant fashion against the Dolphins, it was like, okay, that's really good. You beat a Dolphins team with a kind of a banged up Tua Tagovailoa. He may be on the downward swing. They took care of business. Got their first season opening win in I don't know how many years. So many years. You follow that up by beating the Broncos by 1 point. You go on the road. You defeat the Titans by a considerable amount. You had the unfortunate loss to the Rams. I know we've already gone through this schedule, but then you've knocked off 4 in a row, and you've looked dominant in just about every one of those games in some way, shape, or form. Things were a little close against the Cardinals. But nonetheless, this Indianapolis Colts team has been very surprising, and I know Colts fans are super excited. I'm happy to see them do as well as they are. I'm obviously very happy that Jonathan Taylor is on my fantasy team, and I hope he continues to put up big numbers. And we'll see where this team ends up as the season rolls on. And, of course, when we get to the postseason, I mean, there's a good chance that, the Colts are no worse than the third best team in the AFC, I would imagine. And I'm throwing the Bills and the Chiefs up there just by default because they've been the reigning AFC finalists for the last couple of years, it seems like. So, but the Colts can definitely be in that conversation. They may be able to be in that next conversation that I mentioned earlier, being a part of the Super Bowl conversation, if they can get past the Chiefs here in about a month. So there's my little spiel on where the Colts are at right now. And I know I haven't done much talking about them over the last several weeks because I've been so ate up by what's been going on with the Hoosiers. I did want to go ahead and share my 2 cents on what's been going on up in Indianapolis with the horses, the little baby horses. But with that being said, I'll go ahead and transition us now into what is traditionally our final segment of the day, and that is our non-revenue team shout-outs. Again, I know I say this every time or every once in a while. I got to find a better name for this little portion of the show. Calling it non-revenue shout-outs sounds it almost sounds degrading because we're pointing out the fact that these teams don't bring in any money for the athletic department. I mean, it's the truth, but I guess I just haven't really taken the time to give it a better name. But it is the one moment in the show where we can at least acknowledge and hopefully talk about some good things that are happening with some of the lesser talked about programs amongst IU athletics. And as always, we'll start off with men's soccer. Over this past week, they got a win against Wisconsin at home, 4-1. They followed that up on the road with a 2-3 loss at number 4 Maryland. So unfortunate there. They'll round out their regular season slate this week at Northwestern. Excuse me. They have it appears they have 2 more weeks, but 2 more games that are spread out a week apart. They'll have Northwestern on the road this Friday, and then they'll finish up the regular season next Friday against Rutgers at home at Bill Armstrong Stadium, of course. Both of those games will be broadcast on Big Ten Plus. Heading over to women's soccer, their season unfortunately came to an end this past week. They fell to Iowa at home. Of course, at Bill Armstrong Stadium, 2-0. That gives the women's Hoosiers a final record of 5-6-6. And even though you would have liked to have seen them get one more win, it's probably good to see that it's not 6-6-6, right? We can all agree with that. Either way, unfortunate to see women's soccer after they had a fairly promising start to the season. Things just didn't pan out the way that they would have hoped for later on as the year progressed. And then moving over to women's volleyball, finally, this past week, they were at home against number 20 Minnesota. Unfortunately, they lost that match 3-1, but they did bounce back also at home against Northwestern. They swept them 3-0. And then this week on Friday, they'll travel to Maryland. That game will be broadcast on Big Ten Plus. And then on Sunday, they'll travel to number 19 Penn State. That game will be broadcast on Big Ten Network. I do believe Penn State, are they the reigning national champs or the runner-ups? Or no, they are the national champs from last year. I do believe they defeated Louisville, if I'm not mistaken, in the championship round last year. Either way, that's going to wrap it up for today's show. I appreciate you all each and every week for tuning in, for following along, putting your comments in the comments section, all that good stuff. And I hope I do my very best. I hope it comes off that I'm doing my very best to give you all the best show possible each and every week. So until next time, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com.